Lafayette Avenue Presbyterian Church began construction on this site in 1860. It's remarkable, though, in what we consider to be our very fast-paced world, to recognize that this entire structure and complex, built of carved stone with a massive steeple, was completed in just 2 years. One of the most fascinating things about heritage sites that I've come to discover and revere is the amount of wisdom embedded in the traditional building technologies that comprise this building and many like it, and how the natural materials of the building interface so well with the earth that it's sitting upon. I'm Walter Sedovic. I'm the founding principal and CEO of Walter Sedovic Architects Modern Ruins. Our firm is now 37 years old and dedicated specifically to cultural heritage properties. We've been intimately involved with this church for 25 years, since 1996, in a variety of stewardship campaigns that have sought to make crucial interventions that would sustain the life and the health and the well-being not only of the church building, but of all of those people throughout the community who call this church home. The Opening Doors campaign is designed to do exactly what it promises, to open the doors. It encompasses a scope of work that all fulfill that singular goal. It begins with work at stabilizing the foundation, dealing with the issues of errant water penetration at various portions of the building, both at the top and below, structural stabilization throughout, elements of the facade restoration, including brownstone repair, and finally, as is the promise of the Opening Doors campaign, to open this grand entrance on the north facade to the community in full, to create a new ADA accessible component, to restore the majestic features such as the doors and finishes that all say, this community, please enter. This is your home. All of these problems that we've been describing affect the larger elements of what's referred to as the building envelope. The building envelope is literally the drape that protects the building interior. It's the roof, it's the walls, it's the windows, and most importantly, it's the foundation. And that's where the real action begins. Let's take a look now at the foundation and some of the issues that then are telescoping all the way to the uppermost reaches of the church. This is the foundation directly below where the entrance lies, and it holds a lot of clues to what we're eventually going to see that's right in your face in the sanctuary proper and in the balcony above it. It's crucial to understand the origin of the problems that we're seeking to address. We're going to start right here. There's a crack already existing in the center of this radial arch. And we all know what it means when there's a crack in the center of an arch, because we've all done this with a wishbone, broken it in two. Exactly what causes the wishbone to crack is what's affecting this arch. That is, there's spreading taking place at the very core of where this building relies for its strength, at the foundation and the footings. Well, early builders were exceedingly brilliant about understanding the workings of natural building materials and of the interaction of the buildings and their occupants with the earth, specifically relating to moisture. All of these stones we're looking at are referred to as porous building materials. They're porous for very good reason. First of all, they're natural. They absorb water and they release water. So in a sense, they're a buffer for hard rain. They collect the water and then they can release it back safely. If you take a look at this sand pile below us, I'm going to show you, this is all loose material. This was all once the binding mortar that kept these walls together. Right now, these walls are pretty much standing and holding together out of memory or inertia. This is the activity of the water and the pollutants that it carries, mostly salts, through the walls that begin to disintegrate the walls. And the walls start moving in very subtle ways, much in the way that the arch earlier has a very subtle crack that gets expressed in a much larger fashion the higher in the building we go. They also can transpire moisture into the interior spaces, which has very healthful benefits for the occupants inside. It creates a level of ambient humidity that then through convection rises through the sanctuary, refreshes and cleans the air, and keeps people comfortable both in the winter and in the summer. I also want to mention too that once we get inside the church in the cellar, what normally would have occurred is that the moisture, as I'd mentioned, would have precipitated through the space, also would have come up through the ground. Like the sidewalks, later we added a concrete floor in the cellar which kept all of the moisture at bay, unable to be able to reach the spaces. So again, what did it do? It was forced to the path of least resistance as its inclination is to rise toward warmer surfaces. And we see this sort of condition at the base of all of the foundation piers and so forth. This is referred to as capillary rise. This is the moisture underneath the later concrete floor that's wicking its way up through the path of least resistance. The brick is far more porous than the concrete floor, but it's not designed to sustain that kind of water activity. And as a consequence, so much water carrying so many ground-borne pollutants evaporates all in one place and begins to disintegrate the very stones and brick that are supporting this church. It's crucial that these building walls, the foundations, the very literal foundation of this church building, are made whole again. We have the capacity to do that. We know how to do it. And it's the first scope element for the Opening Doors campaign, because this is where it all begins. Now, we just arrived from the cellar and had a look at two things that are of import that we're going to see played out at this level and further when we reach the balcony itself. One is the brick piers that are disintegrating because of the presence of capillary rise and groundwater seeping up through the piers in ways that they were never intended to handle. Those piers are actually supporting these lovely cast iron columns. Each of these columns in turn supporting the balcony itself. That is the sole means of support for the balcony. So the health and well-being of those brick piers is of crucial importance. The second is we began our discussion in the cellar by looking at the crack in the center of a Roman semicircular arch. We cast our eyes to the proscenium arch in framing the choir balcony here. We'll see that same centerline crack occurring, which is a harbinger of some very, very serious structural damage. That damage is going to be fully addressed through the Opening Doors campaign, but it's important to recognize that this is the symptom. What we'll be addressing and remedying is the cause. So we're now at the culmination here at the east springing of the proscenium arch of the balcony. This has gotten materially worse over the last 20 to 25 years. It began as something small, but as the problems are increasing below at the foundation level, they're propagating into something much more extreme at the top. It's also important, though, to recognize the difference in materials and exactly what's happening here. This, though, is that solid schist foundation wall. As we look at the area where the cracks are beginning to migrate, you'll see that it's hollow. These two different structural systems within the building defining this portion of the sanctuary and of the balcony are critically important, because if you watch how the cracks are moving, they're at a diagonal and they're splitting and opening this way. That means that this portion of the building is literally trying to tear itself away from this. The building is ripping itself apart. It's doing that because it's unstable at the foundation. All those things that we looked at in a smaller microscopic level become much larger the higher up the building that you go. And standing back a bit, we can begin to see even more devastating effects, because not only are these cracks generating themselves all the way up into the very arch itself, they're also threatening the stability of this awesome mural and an artwork to complement the equally awesome stained glass that are such important, rich, and inspiring elements of this sanctuary. When we see cracks like this propagating through the arch itself, we have to become concerned about the stability of the truss above it, because all of these parts are linked together as part of a whole. Nothing works independently in buildings. So we need to trace all of these elements to make sure that the trusses have appropriate bearing and that the capacity of the walls supporting the trusses is exactly the strength that it needs to be and the stability that it needs to be to continue to support the trusses. So all of this, looking at and exploring details of changes that have occurred in the church, are an important component of this Opening Doors campaign, because they signify that we are searching in every corner for clues to ensure that our solutions are holistic, that they've addressed the problems that we see affecting us now and becoming more progressive at their core, at the source, which we will do, that we're addressing issues from top to bottom, and that in the end, the result of this campaign will be leaving this church in this campaign in a very happy stasis, balanced and poised to continue to be central to the lives of people within the neighborhood and larger community for many generations to come.